Streaker Industries of Mound, Minnesota had been making wooden ammunition boxes during the war, and they'd been using the scrap wood for kids' toys. After the war, they continued making wooden toys, but branched out into metal toys as well. Ed Streaker, head of Streaker Industries, took his new metal creations to the American Toy Fair, only to be given the cold shoulder. Despondent, he made his way back home. While having lunch, he got chatting to Lynn Baker. Lynn and two friends were starting up a new business producing garden tools and closet accessories to satisfy the post-war spending boom and to utilise a post-war excess supply of steel. Ed Streaker was selling his factory, a converted schoolhouse, and Lynn felt this would be an ideal location for his new business, the Mound Metalcraft Company. Mound Metalcraft started making products such as tie racks, but Ed Streaker persuaded them to also try his metal toys. Recalling the toys his children owned, Lynn realised they didn't look much like the things they were supposed to and broke easily. Mound Metalcraft worked to make one of Ed Streaker's metal toys tougher and more realistic, showing it off at the 1947 American Toy Fair under the brand name Tonka Toys, using the Dakota Sioux word for great or big, and a lake motif on the logo to honour nearby Lake Minnetonka. The toy was an immediate hit. The following year they added 2 more models, selling over 37,000 by the end of the year. As the 40s turned into the 50s, Tonka sales exploded as baby boomers discovered the tough, realistic Tonka toys. In a world just moving away from cheap tin toys, there really wasn't anything else like it. Mound Metalcraft were farming out work to as many local businesses as possible to satisfy demand. In 1952, orders totaled $1 million, and the following year it was $3 million. By 1953, the lineup had grown to 14 models, including a forerunner of the iconic Tonka dump truck, and sales had expanded to 7 countries. By 1956, Mound Metalcraft officially changed their name to Tonka Toys Incorporated and had moved to a new factory just down the road, employing 350 people. The owners would regularly visit construction sites looking for new vehicles that would inspire them to create a new vehicle. One model that won an award for its innovation was the 1957 Suburban Pumper. It came with a miniature fire hydrant that could be connected to a garden hose. Once the fire truck was connected to the fire hydrant, it could shoot water up to 9 meters. This was just one example of the attention to detail Tonka were taking to make their model vehicles the best on the market. Some vehicles, such as the semi and trailer, that's an articulated lorry in Britain, would be continually altered to improve their quality and to keep up with the changing fashions of real-world vehicles. A sign of things to come would be the 1957 Big Mike dump truck, named after Lynn Baker's grandson. But the iconic Tonka toy, called, try not to snigger, the Mighty Dump, was released in 1964. Like the 2000s fad of making larger and smaller versions of regular sweets and chocolates, Tonka would make mini and mighty versions of their regular toys. With Tonka trucks using a thicker gauge of metal than on regular cars, early models were a little too mighty. They were so heavy, some kids had problems lifting them up, and future models had material removed to make them lighter. But they were still strong. Tonka would pride itself in adverts about how much abuse could be thrown at their toys. Selling all these vehicles meant Tonka had the capital to diversify, purchasing Mel Manufacturing, who made barbecues. This might not seem an obvious move to make, but with toys selling well at Christmas and barbecues selling well in the summer, it was a good way to smooth out production demand and to utilise both factories as well as possible. Tonka introduced the Tiny line of vehicles in 1968, possibly to take on the new threat of Matchbox cars, and it was timely with the new threat of Hot Wheels that same year. Tonka would experiment with hot rod vehicles to try to compete with the new threat, but Hot Wheels became the market leader in pocket-sized vehicles. Tonka would do versions of Jeeps and VW Beetles, and it helped that several of their designers came from the auto industry. Today, lawyers would need to draw up complex agreements to allow this, but in the 1960s, Tonka merely asked for the company's permission, who were generally glad to give it as it was free publicity for their main business. But sometimes Tonka did paid promotions, such as the Allied Vanline Semi from 1961. By the early 1970s, Tonka toys were being manufactured from a factory a third of a mile long, employing 2,000 people around the world. They proclaimed Mound, Minnesota as the truck capital of the world, producing up to 16 million trucks every year. By the end of the 1970s, over 175 million trucks have been produced, making Tonka the most popular truck in the world. They continued to experiment with new markets, such as the Tonka Toddler range, to compete with Fisher-Price, producing vehicles mainly from plastic for the first time. But their metal construction vehicles continued to be their main seller. The workforce was loyal, and the Tonka factory in Mound, Minnesota was a good place to work. But Tonka was finding it harder to compete with cheaper competition that was copying Tonka's sturdy designs. In the early 1980s, Tonka moved production to Texas and Mexico, primarily to lower their production costs. At the same time, they expanded their range of toys to GoBots. Tonka didn't create them, they licensed their design from Bandai in Japan, meaning Tonka mainly did the branding and distribution. Bandai had attempted to release the toys as Machine Men, but had largely failed, except in Australia, so Tonka retained the Machine Men branding there. GoBots books, cartoons and computer games helped sell the toys to children, making it the hottest selling toy of 1984. GoBots were primarily marketed to boys, and Tonka wanted to do the same for a girl's toy. Pound Puppies were originally sold by a Canadian toy company, but Tonka would again work its branding and marketing magic to sell them in 35 countries, again with TV shows and a feature film. Tonka hoped to replicate their GoBots and Pound Puppy success by selling the Sega Master System. Sega weren't doing a good job against Nintendo, so felt a company with experience in US toy distribution could help them make inroads. Soon Segas were in many more US shops, but Tonka's lack of experience selling video games quickly became apparent, and the subpar games on offer meant the Nintendo Entertainment System dominated. In 1987, Tonka expanded by purchasing the Kenner Parker Toy Company, makers of the Easy Bake Oven, Spirograph, Play-Doh, Monopoly, Sorry, Risk, Trivial Pursuit, and if you're a kid from the 1970s, the $6 Million Man action figure. The deal included UK-based Palitoy, makers of Action Man and the Care Bears. This made Tonka a much bigger player in the toy industry, and the Tonka toy line almost an afterthought. But they needed a £290 million loan to make this purchase, and as a publicly listed company, this made them a target for a takeover themselves. With failing sales of their new Ghostbusters products and their Batman products hit with the delay of the Batman Returns film, plus more children buying video games than board games, Tonka was purchased by Hasbro in 1991. Hasbro was more interested in the Kenner Parker products and had no need of the original Tonka toy line, so farmed it out to Funrise Toys in 1998, makers of the wonderful Fart Ninjas. Hasbro attempted to breathe new life back into the Tonka brand with video games, but the main focus today is on classic Tonka vehicles, the bulldozer, front loader, and of course what sandpit wouldn't be complete without a mighty dump. What? Toys then and now have planned obsolescence. They're built to a price. Tonka decided to build longevity and quality into their products. They cost a little more, but thanks to their design skills, we're still able to enjoy a lot of old Tonkas that have survived many a childhood.